Have you ever walked into a room and felt the air shift before you even said a word? Maybe the silence got louder, the air grew heavier. No one called your name, but something changed. That wasn't your imagination. That something was you. Your aura, your presence. It entered before your footsteps did. It wasn't your clothes, not your job title. It was your energy, quiet, grounded, magnetic, speaking volumes in silence. And in a world addicted to performance, distraction, and superficial charm, that kind of presence can disturb the surface. Your calm reflects their chaos. Your clarity reveals their confusion. Not because you're trying to intimidate, but because truth in its rawest form can't be ignored. If you've ever been misunderstood or judged for being too quiet, too intense, or just too much, you're not alone. But what if this wasn't a flaw? What if this is the mark of someone deeply aligned with who they are? Stoic philosophy teaches us that stillness is power. That self-mastery creates a presence stronger than words. You're not here to perform. You're here to embody. In this video, we'll explore 7 powerful signs your aura disturbs others, and why that's not a problem, but a sign you're walking the Stoic path. If this resonates, watch till the end. Like this video, subscribe for more Stoic insight, and share it with someone who walks the same quiet road. Your presence isn't loud, it's legendary. 1. You intimidate without trying. It starts small, the way someone suddenly avoids your gaze, the subtle lift in their voice, a laugh that doesn't feel quite real. You didn't raise your tone, you didn't confront anyone. In fact, you haven't said a single word. So why is your calm presence enough to make others uneasy? This is what happens when your aura walks into the room before you do. When your energy isn't loud, it's undeniable. When you've stopped seeking approval, validation, or applause because you've already built peace within. The stillness you carry isn't passive, it's precise, it's forged. And that makes people nervous, especially those who haven't found that same center in themselves. Your silence becomes a mirror. And in that reflection, people see the chaos they've been ignoring. It's not your words that disturb them. It's what your presence reveals without effort. Some might fidget. Some might overcompensate with false enthusiasm. Some might even label you cold, arrogant, or too intense. But the truth is, they're simply reacting to what they haven't faced in themselves. Because when you walk in with clarity and control, you don't just take up space, you shift the entire energy into it. Epictetus once said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." And that mastery is what people feel when they're around you. When you're no longer tossed by moods, praise, or criticism, you become immovable. And in that immovability, you expose what's unstable. You don't have to speak the truth for it to echo. It's in the way you sit, the way you look, the way you simply are. Imagine a master fighter. He doesn't dance, he doesn't shout, he stands, composed, grounded, unshaken, while his opponent spins, yells, flails. That stillness says more than any strike. It speaks of discipline, control, and raw, refined power. Your presence, when you've done the inner work, holds that same weight. You don't project fear, but you carry gravity, and that gravity makes those with hollow confidence feel the pull. This isn't aggression, it's alignment. And alignment is rare. Most people are trying to prove something, sell something, earn something. You, on the other hand, show up with nothing to prove. No mask, no act, just you, real, awake, and in control. And that alone unsettles the ones still hiding behind roles they haven't outgrown. You don't need to soften your presence to make others comfortable. A Stoic man doesn't bend to perception. He bends to reason, to virtue, to the truth. Your task isn't to dilute yourself. It's to remain still when others shake. Stay silent when others shout, and choose clarity when others chase attention. Because the goal isn't to be understood by everyone. It's to be at peace with yourself, regardless. Let them think you're too intense. Let them mislabel your restraint. What they feel is not your harshness. It's their own fragility echoing back. And that's not yours to fix. Your job is to carry yourself with unwavering integrity, to act from discipline, not emotion, to observe more than you react, to protect your inner calm like a soldier protects sacred ground. You intimidate without trying because you've chosen not to perform. You've chosen to master yourself. In a world that glorifies noise, your silence is resistance. In a culture that fears discomfort, your grounded presence is confrontation. But for those who are ready, it is also a guide. So don't retreat. Stand, watch, breathe, Speak only when it matters. And know that your strength lies not in how loud you are, but in how deeply you're anchored. 2. Your silence is power. In a world addicted to noise, where people race to speak just to prove they exist, there's a different kind of power. The power of intentional silence. You've seen it before, maybe in a boardroom, maybe in a confrontation, maybe in a moment you didn't expect. One man sits still, calm, present. He doesn't interrupt, he doesn't compete. But when he speaks, everyone listens, because his silence wasn't a weakness, it was control. That's the kind of presence you carry when you've stopped filling space with noise. When your mind is no longer frantic and your need to be heard is no longer desperate, you don't speak to fill the void. You speak when it matters. And that's what makes your silence magnetic. You no longer fear the quiet, you own it. And when a man owns his silence, the world pays attention. Think of Pythagoras, the ancient philosopher who once said, "Be silent, or let your words be better than silence." He wasn't promoting avoidance, he was teaching restraint, wisdom, depth, the kind of mindset where every word is chosen, every pause intentional. In Stoicism, silence isn't an emptiness, it's a strategy. It's how you measure a room, it's how you gather strength, and it's how you signal power without ever raising your voice. Imagine a tense meeting. Everyone's talking, trying to lead, trying to dominate. But the man everyone respects the most? He says nothing. He watches, he listens. His body language is calm, his breath was steady. And then, in a moment that matters, he speaks. Just a few words. And the room shifts. Not because of volume, but because of weight. His silence built tension, and his words became resolution. That's the impact of earned quiet. Your silence does the same. Not everyone will understand it. Some will mistake it for disinterest, others might feel intimidated, unsure of what you're thinking. But that's not your concern. What matters is this: you are no longer reacting, you are choosing. And in a world that rewards the loudest, that choice makes you dangerous, in the best possible way. Stoic philosophy doesn't tell you to be mute, it tells you to master your voice by mastering your mind. When you speak with discipline, when you know the value of your words, you stop throwing them around for validation. You become deliberate. And deliberate men are rare. You don't need to explain yourself constantly. You don't need to debate every opinion. Sometimes the most powerful response is no response at all. Because silence, when rooted in awareness, becomes a mirror. It reflects confidence, clarity, and strength. And that reflection can disturb those who use noise to hide from themselves. Your silence sets the standard. It's how you filter the unnecessary, how you protect your peace, and how you move with intention, not impulse. In every room you enter, your stillness says, "I am not here to prove. I am here to observe, to understand, and to act only when the time is right." That's why your silence unsettles some and inspires others, because they can't predict it, can't manipulate it, can't control it. And in that uncertainty, your quiet becomes louder than any voice in the room. You've been misunderstood before, labeled as cold, distant, hard to read. But what they couldn't see was the war you had already won inside yourself. You no longer needed the world's attention. You had earned your own respect. And that, above all, is why your silence is power. So let the world talk. You keep choosing presence over performance, depth over noise, and stillness over reaction. Let your silence speak, because when it's rooted in truth, it always does. 3. You shift the whole room's energy. Energy isn't just an abstract concept. It's tangible, like the resonance of a tuning fork vibrating at a precise frequency. When you walk into a room with grounded inner stability, everything around you feels it. Things adjust. Not because you demanded attention, but because your presence introduced a new frequency, one that either invites harmony or provokes resistance. And the truth is, most people aren't used to that kind of stillness. They're used to chaos being camouflaged as charisma. So when you show up carrying calm, not chaos, the atmosphere can't help but respond. You've felt it yourself. A room full of chatter starts to quiet when you enter. People slow down, shift in their chairs, and speak more deliberately. Not because you said anything, but because something about your presence disrupted their autopilot. You didn't need to act like a leader. You didn't need to posture. You were just aligned, mentally still, emotionally centered, and clear on why you're there. That's not magic. That's self-mastery, and it's one of the rarest traits in any man. Imagine being a lighthouse in a storm. You don't control the waves, you don't stop the wind. But your light, constant, calm, unwavering, offers a reference point in the chaos. It doesn't beg to be followed, yet those adrift will steer by it. That's what your aura becomes when your energy is rooted in awareness and when your clarity isn't performative but earned. You don't overpower the room, you reset it. You shift its rhythm simply by being tuned into your own. It's why some people gravitate toward you without knowing why. It's also why others feel unsettled, even defensive. Because not everyone is ready to meet the version of themselves that you reflect back. Some admire the discipline they sense in you. Others feel exposed to it. But either way, you didn't change. They did. This is what many call the ability to command a room. Not by being the loudest, but by carrying presence. Some of the most respected leaders don't say much at all, but when they do, every word lands with weight. Their voice isn't louder, their energy is deeper. Their impact doesn't come from control, but from clarity. Because when your energy is anchored, you don't react to the room. The room reacts to you. You're not there to impress, you're not there to compete, you're there to be. And being, fully, consciously, unshakably, changes things. It's what separates the ones who need a stage from the ones who carry gravity just by standing still. That's stoicism in practice. That's what happens when you've stopped being defined by the world and started defining how you move through it. You won't always get recognition for this. Some will misread you. Some will label you as intense or distant. But that's not your concern. Your job isn't to entertain comfort. It's to embody consistency. To carry yourself like a man who doesn't need to speak loudly because his life already speaks for him. Your aura becomes a standard, and that standard silently invites everything around it to rise or leave. So keep walking into rooms with calm. Breathe deeper than the noise. Stand taller than the confusion. You're not here to prove anything. You're here to remember who you are and remind the room what alignment feels like. That's why your presence shifts the energy. Not because you demand power, but because you are no longer disturbed by what disturbs others. That difference makes all the difference. 4. You were born to disturb what's fake. It's like placing a solid granite block in the middle of a room filled with intricately painted styrofoam statues. You don't need to smash anything. The moment you arrive, the illusion collapses. Not through force, but through contrast. Your presence, real and weighty, makes the artificial stand out. The room doesn't fall silent because you asked for it, but because truth just entered, and fiction knows it has nowhere to hide. There are people who, when they walk into a space, shift the entire dynamic without saying a word. The jokes become quieter, the empty praise dries up, conversations suddenly need substance. Not because anyone was attacked, but because a man who no longer wears a mask just walked in, and masks don't survive around him. That man is you. And that shift is not a coincidence. It's the effect of being deeply rooted in what's real. In a world that thrives on curated impressions, where people are trained to perform even their personalities, authenticity is disruptive. When you no longer play the game, when your words match your values and your actions mirror your core, your mere existence challenges everything built on the surface. You don't need to expose anyone. Your stillness does that on its own. The way you stand, the way you stay silent, the way you simply choose not to participate in shallow performance, it's enough to create discomfort. Not because you're judgmental, but because you no longer play pretend. George Orwell, the British author known for exposing oppressive systems, once said, "In a time of universal deceit, telling the truth is a revolutionary act. But you don't have to say anything. You are the truth. You live it. And in an environment where facades are standard, your truth becomes a small revolution. Not loud, not angry, but undeniable. Just like the granite in the middle of the foam. It doesn't need to move to remind everything else what real feels like. You weren't born to fit in. You were made to expose. And that doesn't mean being confrontational. It means standing firm in your values, holding your ground when others waver, choosing silence when others perform. It means speaking only when necessary and letting your stillness say the rest. You don't fake smiles. You don't engage in conversations that drain your soul. And when someone tells a story meant to impress rather than express, you don't feed it. That restraint, That refusal to validate performance creates a ripple. People become aware of their own inauthenticity, often for the first time. And yes, it will make some uncomfortable. Some will retreat, others might push back. But none of that is your responsibility. Your task is not to protect people from the effect of your clarity. Your task is to protect that clarity, no matter what it awakens around you. In Stoic practice, that is strength, to stand calm in the face of discomfort, not just outside, but in others. So when you walk into a room and feel the air shift, don't apologize for it. Don't try to shrink. Don't pretend to be less so others can stay hidden. Hold your space. Speak when you must. But more than anything, be real. The man who has made peace with himself doesn't need a stage. His presence is the stage. And when you live in alignment with what's true, every moment becomes a quiet act of resistance. Not against people, but against illusion. That's why you disturb what's fake. You don't attack it, you outlast it. Your existence isn't an act of rebellion. It's an act of return to what's real, what matters, and what will still stand when the styrofoam crumbles. That is your power. And that is your place. So that's the first 4 signs revealed. Now ask yourself, where did you see yourself in these? Was there a moment when you thought, that's exactly me? Time for a quick check-in. How many of these 4 signs do you recognize in yourself? Drop that number in the comments below. If you're seeing these signs, your aura isn't ordinary. It's working. It's making waves, whether you notice it or not. Still feeling that quiet power? Good. Let's go even deeper, into the final 3 signs. Subtle, yes, but just as powerful. 5. You see through the masks. Something about that smile didn't feel right. The words were enthusiastic, but the shoulders were stiff. And somehow you knew. Not because you're cynical, not because you're judging, but because you feel the static beneath the performance. You sense the dissonance others overlook, the tension between who someone says they are and who they're barely holding together inside. You pick it up in the voice that trembles behind the cheer, in the eyes that don't match the grin. In this way, someone avoids stillness because silence might reveal too much. You've always noticed what others miss. You don't just hear what's said, you register what's not said. And this ability, it's not paranoia, it's precision, like emotional X-ray. While most people are busy reacting to the surface, you read the current underneath. That doesn't come from talent, it comes from work. From years of facing your own masks, from dissecting your own contradictions, from standing in front of the mirror long enough to stop lying to yourself. And now, when others wear the same disguises you once wore, you feel it instantly, not to expose them, not to shame them, but because your clarity makes the fog around them visible. Think of a seasoned negotiator or a battle-tested coach. They don't just process what you say, they watch the pause before your words. They notice the breath you hold before the lie. They track the shift in posture, the flash in your eyes. That's you now. You observe with stillness. You read with empathy. You know what pain looks like beneath pride because you've met your own. That's what Stoicism gave you. Not a cold heart, but a sharp eye. Not judgment, but discernment. It's not always welcome. Some people don't want to be seen. They're not ready to drop the act. Your presence, too steady, too quiet, becomes a mirror they avoid. You don't have to speak. Just being there disrupts the performance. And so they shift away, they call you intense or distant. But what they really mean is that you see too much. And it's hard to keep smiling when someone sees through you. This is the kind of perception that doesn't announce itself. It sits in the corner, watches the room, and waits. You don't scan for weakness. You just recognize it because you faced your own. You don't weaponize what you see. You carry it with grace. And that's why people trust you without knowing why, or fear you without knowing what exactly unnerves them. That level of awareness is rare because it requires stillness. And stillness is rare because distraction is easier. But you've chosen the harder path, to slow down, to feel full. Pay attention, and that path makes you dangerous, not because you hurt people, but because you can't be fooled. That presence, forged in solitude, anchored by discipline, is exactly what gives your perception weight. And when it gets overwhelming, when the room feels too loud with things unsaid, your job is not to fix it, just to remain whole in the noise. Stoicism teaches that we are not disturbed by events, but by our judgments of them. So observe without absorbing. Notice without reacting. Let your insight be silent. Let it be strong. Because in a world addicted to facades, truth doesn't need a microphone. It needs a man who has stood in his own darkness and can now see clearly, even in others. That's who you are. And that's why the masks don't work around you anymore. 6. Your presence is loud, even in silence. You're sitting in a group. You haven't said a word. You haven't moved much either. But somehow you feel it. Those occasional glances. The way conversation shifts slightly when you adjust your posture. You're not commanding the room. You're simply in it. And yet, people register your presence. They feel it. As if your silence occupies its own space. As if you're transmitting something without trying to send a single signal. This is not charisma. It's not charm. It's not about being extroverted or magnetic in the traditional sense. This is something deeper. It's presence. Real, rooted, grounded presence. The kind that doesn't require noise or movement to be known. It simply is. And people, whether they understand it or not, respond to it. It happens when you've trained yourself to live in alignment. When you don't wear masks. When you've faced enough silence in yourself to stop fearing it in others. It happens when you stop performing and start being. Marcus Aurelius, Stoic philosopher and Roman emperor, once wrote, "Don't waste time arguing about what a good man should be one." That sentence, simple as it is, holds the key. You're not interested in talking about integrity. You're practicing it, quietly, consistently. And that consistency becomes a frequency people can feel. It doesn't come from perfection. It comes from discipline, from showing up to your own principles day after day, from choosing clarity when confusion would be easier, from holding to your values when no one else is watching. And that effort, that quiet inner architecture, becomes something others sense, even if they can't name it. You don't need to convince anyone of who you are. They know, not because you told them, but because they feel it. It's why your silence can sometimes feel heavier than someone else's voice. It's why people turn their heads when you shift in your seat. It's why they glance over at you, not because you interrupted, but because you've already been counted without saying a word. You don't make noise. You carry depth. And in a world drowning in shallow performance, depth stands out like still water in the middle of a storm. You don't force presence, you cultivate it. Through still mornings, through restraint in conflict, through honoring what you said you'd do long after the mood to do it has passed. That's Stoicism, not theory, not quote sharing, but embodiment. Real men don't need to be loud to be heard. When you walk in calm, aware, and anchored, you enter like a weight, a gravity, a standard, and that weight disrupts anything flimsy. You may not notice it, but others do. Their tone shifts, their posture corrects, some lean closer, others back off. Not because you asked them to, but because your silence reflected something they'd forgotten, truth. And truth doesn't always feel comfortable, but it's always felt. So next time you're in a room and wonder why people are reacting when you've done nothing, remember, it's not what you did, it's who you are. That version of you that no longer seeks attention, no longer performs for approval, no longer fills silence to feel worthy. That version has a presence, not because it demands it, but because it is it. You don't need to dominate, you don't need to prove it. Presence is power, not when it shouts, but when it simply refuses to shrink. So stay silent, stay centered, and let the room feel you. Not for what you say, but for the weight of who you've become. 7. You trigger shadows in others. Sometimes your light doesn't just illuminate the room, it reflects it. And not everyone is ready to see what comes back in that reflection, especially not the parts they've worked so hard to keep hidden. When you walk in grounded, silent, unshaken, your presence becomes a quiet mirror. You don't point fingers, you don't expose anything, but somehow your very being brings the buried parts of others to the surface. You've felt it before. You speak with calm, and someone snaps back defensively. You simply exist, and someone misreads you as arrogant, distant, or too much. It's not you, it's what your energy stirs in them. Your stillness brings contrast. Your clarity highlights their confusion. Your control reminds them of the control they lack. You're not trying to offend, but your alignment unsettles those still living out of sync with themselves. People project. They always have, especially when they feel seen, not in the way they want, but in the way they fear. When you've done the inner work, when you've met your shadow, confronted your contradictions, sat in silence with your regrets, You no longer flinch in the face of others. And that calm, that lack of reaction, that lack of need to defend or explain, it becomes unbearable to those who haven't done the same. Epictetus once said, "If someone speaks ill of you, do not defend yourself. Instead reply, clearly he does not know the rest of my faults, or he would not have mentioned only these." That's the Stoic way. You don't waste energy justifying. You don't absorb other people's discomfort as your responsibility. You recognize that their pain is not yours to fix, and you keep walking. That's why some people recoil when you're near. It's not what you said, it's what you didn't say. It's not what you did, it's what you didn't need to do. You didn't try to win them over. You didn't perform. You didn't pander. And that refusal to play along can feel threatening in a world where validation is currency. But your value doesn't rise or fall with the room's comfort. You were made for more than applause. You were built for truth, and truth, even unspoken, reveals. You trigger the shadows in others, not by intention, but by integrity. Because when a man walks with quiet honor, those who still hide behind noise and pretense will feel the tremor of being unmasked. So let them misunderstand. Let them call you cold. Let them call you distant. What they're really saying is, "I'm not ready to see myself clearly." And that's not your battle. You are not here to be palatable. You are here to be real. And sometimes the most real thing you can do is not react, not soften, not explain. Just stay grounded, stay still. Your energy disturbs what's fake. It calls forth the buried. And while not everyone will appreciate it, some will awaken because of it. You don't need to shout the truth. Just stand in it. That alone is confrontation enough. And for those who are ready, your presence will feel like home. Not because it's easy, but because it's true. Let the projections come. Let the resistance rise. Let the masks fall where they may. Your job is not to dim your light to make others comfortable in the dark. Your job is to keep shining quietly, without apology. That is strength. That is Stoic power. That is why you disturb what others work so hard to keep hidden. And that is why you must not stop. The truth is, your presence carries more weight than you realize. You don't need to speak loudly to be heard. You don't need to impress to be remembered. And you don't need to explain yourself to be understood. Not when your life speaks louder than words ever could. Throughout this journey, we've explored what it means to walk with quiet strength, to intimidate without trying, to shift the room with your stillness, to disturb what's fake, to see through masks, to carry silence as power, and to reflect others' hidden truths without saying a word. All of this points to one thing: self-mastery. And that, my friend, is the essence of the Stoic path. A disciplined, grounded, intentional way of living. Not for applause, not for recognition, but because it's the only path that leads to real peace. You don't develop this kind of aura by accident, you build it. Slowly, silently, consistently, through your habits, through your presence, through the way you carry yourself in rooms that misunderstand you. So here's the invitation: practice. Every single day. Don't chase noise. Don't fear being too much for those who haven't yet found their own depth. Focus instead on becoming unshakable. Train your mind, hold your energy, honor your silence, and let the world adjust. Because when you rise through presence, when you lead through stillness, you become the kind of man who doesn't just enter a space, he transforms it. If this message speaks to something deep within you, share your story in the comments below. Tell us how your presence has shifted rooms, changed conversations, or revealed the truth. Your experience may help another man find his strength in the quiet. This is your time to walk with clarity, with purpose, with power, and to let your aura speak the truth you've worked so hard to become.